So, we are here. This is going to be a pain to edit because I'm in a rambling mood, so I'm going to talk on a lot of tangents. In case any of the footage from the other video was salvageable, I'm going to recap this quickly, also because I don't think it's that important. Basically, from the ages of about 4 to 8, I played a make-believe game with my friends that included characters that we could see, but no one else could, so we had to kind of like subconsciously agree on what they were doing, but without talking about it. It was weird. And a big part of the game was that you never acknowledged that it was a game. It was kind of like we had secret identities and no one else was allowed to know, and so every part of the game was treated like it was a secret reality. When I was about 8, oh fuck, right, hold on, 2 seconds, I'm gonna go get tea. Okay, tea has been acquired. Right, we made a make-believe game, pretended it was real, basically joint imaginary friends involved, fun times. I still, looking back on this, I find it really funny, and I only mention it every time I talk about my childhood and maladaptive daydreaming, because it was kind of like we had this big joint paracosm, because it wasn't even like we ourselves were different in the other world, so it was essentially we were all our para-me's, and we had our paras around us, and there was this universe. It was cool. But when I was about 8, I came into school one day, picked up the game where we left off, and my friends were like, you know what, we're too old to be playing make-believe, I think we should stop now. And little old maladaptive daydreamer me was like, I went home and cried herself to sleep. And I don't remember what first caused my first daydream. I wish I did. But, can we all, I feel like maladaptive daydreamer things, can we all share what our first ever daydream was based on? Because most of us, because it starts in childhood, based it off something we watched. What was yours? Because mine was, I'll put a picture of like the cover here-ish. Meme Power, like the dubbed version. And it wasn't even based off that, it was based off like fandom recreations I'd seen on the internet. And I used to daydream about that on my swing set. That it was a wooden swing set and it'd been there for literally as long as I can remember. I don't know what possessed me to go sit on it and come up with these ideas, but it's kind of like once I started I couldn't stop. So that started about when I was 8. I think it started to get uncontrollable when I started secondary school. When I started secondary school, a lot of stuff for my mental health started to go wrong, to say the least. But yeah, it started to get quite bad then, because obviously, as well, when I was, so in Scotland we have like primary school and then we have secondary school. You start primary school when you're 5 and you finish when you're about 10, 11. So in primary school you don't have many responsibilities at all. But obviously once I came into secondary school, it was like, now I have homework, now I have like classes where actually like I can fail, and my mental health took a hit, so of course it got like really uncontrollable. I think the next milestone I can really remember, in terms of noting the development of my daydreaming, was the first ever daydream I distinctly remember that I couldn't control. I had this character. Yeah, I think I'm going to divide this video up. So, in the real world, that is how my daydreaming developed. I had an imaginary game with my friends, which then turned inward on a swing set when my friends grew out of this game. So now we get to talk the bit where I'm going to have to really stop myself from going overboard, which is about the paracosms themselves. So, interesting thing, I currently have 2 paracosms. I have one of them that has been there since I started. So when I'm talking about my Daydreaming Developing when I was 8, that's the one I'm talking about. It's supernatural. I told you it was based on Mew Power, although it's come very, very far from that. That was its roots. So think supernatural, anything is possible kind of world, not based on reality, based mostly on fictional characters. And my other paracosm didn't really develop until about 3rd year of secondary school, somewhere around that. So I'm spending a lot more time on the swings this first year of secondary school. But you know, it's harmless. I'm making up a story in my head. That's what I used to call it. I used to, when I first tried to figure out, like, is this normal? Someone else must be experiencing this. What I used to research a lot was being addicted to writing, addicted to coming up with stories, because my first paracosm very much was just a story to me. Obviously, it meant a lot to me, and the characters felt very real. But my excuse for continuing it was that I was thinking up the plot, and one day I'd write it down. That day is yet to come, but you know. So the first thing that struck me as this isn't normal is when I had this specific character. I think I've tried to... right. I'm just going to hope captions and whatnot can fix this, because I'm very close to restarting this video, and I did that a lot last time, and that's why I don't... right, sorry. Okay. Now, I say character, and I keep hesitating when I say character, because, like I said, I have 2 paracosms. The first one, again, is supernatural. It was deliberately fictional, and it's always been removed from my real life. And I told myself it was a story I was writing just in my head, and one day I get it down in words. So I hold it to a lot of like writing standards, if that makes sense. Like I don't like the plot has to be realistic and interesting. Characters have to have, you know, arcs and stuff. And I used to talk about that story therefore with my friends a lot because I told them that was the story I was writing. So I refer to, you'll notice, in terms of my different paracosms, the first one I will refer to it as a universe, and I will often refer to the characters within it as characters rather than paras. Because a para to me is a character from your paracosm who you directly interact with. It's not really the definition it goes as, but that's what it feels like to me. And I don't directly interact with these characters. Same goes a bit for parami. I have kind of issue with that term because, like, I often refer to the parami of my first paracosm as my main character, because she is deliberately very far removed from me. Actually, she wasn't even my first, like normally paracosms start with your parami. She wasn't even my first character in that universe. It was a completely different character who's now a side character. And when I introduced her, I did introduce her under my birth name and as myself. I have since changed her name and changed a lot of attributes of her personality. A lot of things have happened to her that haven't happened to me, and I've changed her fundamentally as a person in ways that I can't even really relate to, other than relating through her. So while she is technically the parami and that is the person who that paracosm revolves around, she's not. I wouldn't consider her a version of myself. There was a point to that. So yeah, I called my paras from my first paracosm characters. Sorry, my voice is going. This is so annoying because I'm actually enjoying filming, and I keep finding it really anxious to film. Right, this is what he's for. So yes, this character I don't know how to describe this besides just say wouldn't do what I told her to. She kept disappearing from scenes. It was a really, really interesting thing for me to watch as my little 11-year-old self. I think, yeah, 11-ish. Because I'd like decide, right, this is what's going to happen in this scene. And then they'd all sit in the room and they'd be talking. and it's like the focus would shift away from her for a minute. I'd maybe focus on another character for a second, and when I looked back, she was gone. And I could drag her back in, but the minute I stopped paying attention again, she was gone again. And she, it's honestly been so long, I can't remember what she did. But keeping in mind I was 11, she essentially turned evil. And keeping in mind again I was 11, that was my parame/main's first kill. It was in self-defense, but, and I didn't want any of that to happen. That was not how I planned for the story to go. It upset me greatly. But even looking back on it, like, there was no reason for that to happen. Maybe it was about, I don't know, two-faced friends or something like that, because I had a lot of them at the time. My subconscious was trying to tell me something, I don't know, but it felt like it came out of nowhere. And even looking at it now, it almost feels like a message from my powers, like, you can't control us. Like, this is not, you think you are the boss here, but you're not. So that was my first, definitely my first daydream I couldn't control. This continues, the world develops lots more. I have lots of really important powers to me at this point. It means a lot. I am beginning to stay up all night daydreaming. It really bothered my mum, because, like, A, the swing made a horrible noise. B, by this point the swing was beginning to degrade, because it was wooden, and like I said, it'd been there most of my life, and it wasn't even put into the ground properly. And as you guys know, when you get into a high adrenaline daydream, which these daydreams often were because they were supernatural and kind of action orientated, you go out your repetitive movement much harder than you do otherwise. So like the whole swing would, like, I don't even know how to describe it. I would swing so high up that it was like I had to fall back down, and the whole thing moved when it happened. 2014. My mum took down the swing while I was at school, and oh my god, I came home and cried and cried and cried, and I don't know how to describe this without sounding like, I know maladaptive daydreaming, we're often accused of sounding crazy and we feel it all the time, but it's not like I was choosing to daydream about this, or not even choosing to daydream about it. I wasn't choosing to daydream, it just, the entire time I was upset, which lasted a couple of days, until I found a resolution, about my swing set being taken down. I heard screaming. Like, I wouldn't go so far as to say I was like hallucinating or anything, because I knew it was coming from my head, but it was like I could hear my characters dying. There's no other way to describe it, and it shook me to all hell. I used to, before my swing set, I don't know where this came from either, I used to, like, wander around in my, like, back garden, like, pace instead of use the swing, and think. And that occurred to me a couple of days after this grueling, like, screaming had been going on for, which is when I discovered that and it took practice, but I could daydream and pace instead. So, like, I had to reteach myself how to daydream properly by pacing instead of using a swing set. That's when my type of daydreaming changed. I also think it got a wee bit worse then, but the issue with starting to pace was that it was kind of like no one could tell me not to, because I was in the privacy of my own room, and it meant, like, before, if I was watching media that triggered me, I'd have to, like, go get my gloves, because I had a rope swing, so, like, I got rope burns on my hands all the time. I'd have to go get my shoes, and then I'd have to go outside and daydream, and if it was, like, a short-lived daydream, then I'd just wander back in, and then I'd have to, like, run all the way out the house and all the way back in again if I had, like, on and off inspiration. Whereas with pacing, it's literally just, like, put the laptop down, get up, pace, pick it back up again, you know? Interesting thing, this is where we talk about my second paracosm, which I can tell you I think a lot more about because it's grounded in reality. And on face value a lot less morbid than my other one. So 2015, I heard the word maladaptive daydreaming for the first time ever. I can't remember where I found it. I think it was just one of my Google searches finally paid off. And I at the time, the only thing really I could find of it was other people's like stories of, I've done this all my life, I've been so embarrassed about it, it's so good to hear that other people feel like this, and I wanted to tell all my friends, and I did tell a few of them, and let's just say it didn't go well. Let's leave it at that. So, little old daydreamer me does what any daydreamer does when you want something to happen desperately and you feel like you need acceptance in a certain way and you're not getting it. I developed some paras. I forgot, honestly, this is how my second paracosm like developed, but it's really funny and cool to look back on. So I developed this concept of game makers. My cat's snoring, sorry. So game makers were essentially the supernatural species equivalent of maladaptive daydreamers. In fact, this new paracosm, I called it the playground, because the idea was it's a world between worlds where these game makers could hang out, and all of them identified as maladaptive daydreamers. So there were 5 of us, and each of them had a developed paracosm, like, attached to them, like the same way I had my first paracosm. So that was the original premise. It started 2015 when I found out about maladaptive daydreaming. Being aware for me that I was daydreaming when I was doing it, or that the other world, my first paracosm, wasn't real, was jarring after a while. I wrote my creative piece for an English class about it. That feeling when you are daydreaming and you suddenly come to the realization that it's not, I hate even saying it, that it's not real. And I've always said, it feels like when you realise you're breathing. Suddenly it's a conscious effort, and everything starts to look like it's moving in stop motion, and they're made of like cardboard, and you're hearing their lines in your own head voice instead of how you normally hear them. It's horrible. The playground, my second paracosm, didn't feel like that for a long time. Only a few paras from the original world could interact with the playground worlds, and when they went back, it was deliberately part of the canon that they forgot what happened. But my main didn't. Not really through choice. And it got to the point where we had an argument. Like, I actually fell out with her because something horrible happened to her, and she was kind of like, why did you let this happen? Why did you make this happen? And I'm like, I don't have control over this. I'm sorry, I can't choose. She was like, you don't really love me. You wouldn't, if you cared about me, you'd find a way to stop this. And I had to have the real world realization that I couldn't keep communicating with them directly, because I was giving my characters an existential crisis, essentially. Like, that's what would happen. I even had a character, Virus, who, and she just stared directly into the camera. And it creeped me the hell out. It really upset me. And she used to go around and, like, delete characters and places, and the world would look really glitchy, and it'd be really difficult to daydream, because every time I came back to my daydream, it was like more was gone. She was deleting the world. And every time it was like attacks. Whenever I had one of those attacks, once it was solved, I would wipe all of the characters' memories of it, because it was really hard to move forward from. So eventually, the playground was just maladaptive daydreamers. There was no supernatural element to it, and now it's set here. Like, it's set in this real world with me as myself. Obviously, some of my experiences are different, and by different, I mean usually worse, because my brain processed bad things that happened to me. It's kind of like my brain took stuff that was happening to me, amplified it so I would feel the emotions, and put it onto, like, my her, to, like, make me deal with it. So obviously she's a wee bit worse off in the mental health department, because worse things have happened to her than they have me. And whenever I have, like, an anxiety attack or a panic attack, more often than not, she will have, like, a flashback. Which means that the powers around her can help. And by them helping her, it helps me, if that makes sense. It was a thing when the playground was created that no one went by their real name, because obviously we're all maladaptive daydreamers and no one identified with their real life, so but she was always Alexis, and I came to the realization a couple of years ago that I was closer to her. I identified more with her than I did this world's me. You know, I did the thing. I knew I was going to do the thing. See, I avoided talking about my first paracosm, but I can't not talk about the second one because it's so... My second paracosm is home. I would live there in a heartbeat before I live here. And I might cut that out because I don't want anyone in my real life to see that and be like, I love everyone in my real life. Everyone in my real life is in that paracosm. That's part of the thing. The people in my second paracosm are my family. And sometimes when they're having bad days, it's like, you know how when your friend texts you they're having a bad day and you drop what you're doing to like pay more attention to them. I do that. Like, the whole point of the playground now is it's sort of like an unofficial mental health institution, I want to say, but not really. It's basically a bunch of teenagers who are mentally unwell living together, who like consider each other family because they've grown through all kinds of hell. So they go through bad times just like I do, just like anyone does, and when it happens I have to put some of my real life on the back burner to pay more attention to them, just like I would any other person in my real life. And if you don't have a paracosm that takes care of you, you should make one, because oh my god, it makes life so much easier. I said I wasn't going to do this. I said this was going to be a basic retelling of my maladaptive daydreaming story, and instead I've rambled on about my paracosm. And I've been recording for half an hour, and I wonder how much this is me just talking about that. Well, you know, yeah, kidding. Okay, I think we're done talking about this for now. Sorry if I just rambled at you about my paracosms for ages. I really tried not to do that, but sometimes it's kind of inevitable. Thank you very much if you watched this whole thing. Very much appreciate it. You deserve a gold star because that must have been difficult. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna go attempt to film a more educational kind of version of this. Wish me luck. Bye bye.